Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're joining us today in today's live lecture coming to you from Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University. Remember, Nkolo Mahadum is an university where we organize lectures mainly from the Igbo man, Biafran, and African perspectives. And today's date is Nkwo Market Day in the Igbo lunar calendar and 10/19/25 in the Roman Catholic calendar. Also, we encourage you in this university to use your naturally given common sense, which we call Akonuche in Igbo language. And because of the several misinformation and miseducation, that was why Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University was set up, so that we can give you the correct education, the correct direction, so that you get the correct information you're supposed to get. So you see things from the Igbo man, the Biafran, and African perspectives, how it concerns you. So you should not be seeing things how other cultures are seeing and interpreting things. That is very, very, very important. And we encourage you to please to join us, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And right now we are live on YouTube, we are live on Facebook, we are live on Twitter. So please join us today, as the title of today's lecture is The Injustices Against the Igbo Race in Nigeria. Today's title of today's lecture is The Injustices Against the Igbo Race in Nigeria. And we shall have an interactive section with Keny Inugo-A, a public analyst specializing in media psychology and public policy. You can see that Ken is a well-versed public analyst specializing in media psychology and public policy. He will be live with me here, trying to help us to see and know all the numerous injustices against the Igbo race in Nigeria, which is very, very, very shocking. And without wasting your time, I'll be bringing in Keny with me in the studio to discuss all the injustices against the Igbo race in Nigeria. So Ken, thank you very much for coming on to this program today. We are very much happy to have you again, so that you will help our people, the Igbo race, the Biafran people, the African people, to understand the numerous injustices against the Igbo race in Nigeria. Thank you for coming on board live with us today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me again today.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I also like to thank our listeners and supporters. For those of you who support this program, you're welcome. Those who have not or are thinking how to support the program, Dr. Stephen will advise you along the line on how to do it. This is expose to show the side of the Igbo man's history, living, culture, their successes and their challenges, particularly as regards to injustices against the people and their place of origin. Again, thank you for bringing me up again today.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Mr. Keny Inugo. And without wasting much time, because I know that most of our listeners will be eager to learn these injustices from Nkolo Mahadum Wisdom University. And so, Mr. Keny Inugo, what can you tell us about the several injustices in Nigeria dating back to the time they drew the map of Nigeria to include Igbo people in Benue State, in Kogi State, and call them North Central, and then include them into the bigger North. Each time you hear the leader saying one North, but that one knot even included Igbo people in that knot. So starting from there, can you tell our listeners, our followers, what they need to know about injustices against the Igbo race that started from that time?
Well, because the Igbos are situated to the eastern or southeastern part of Nigeria, they are bordered to the west, River Niger. That was definite. That was not a natural boundary. I mean, the boundary of the entire Igbos, because some Igbos are living on the western side of Niger River. They also occupied areas all the way to the south in some Atlantic Ocean, and some of them lived quite close to the Cameroonian border on the eastern side. There are many disparities or uh, incorrect information as regards where the boundaries are. In fact, in the 1970s, there was a boundary adjustment committee that came and didn't do quite a good job. In fact, did a worse job than the original creators of the state. Eastern region, before, where the Igbos predominantly lived, was eventually carved out as Biafra during 1967 to 1970. And that's where the Nigerian Civil War, as they called it, or the Biafran War as it really is, was waged. But where is Ndibo? In what country as of today? Well, the geographical, political, geopolitical place called Nigeria is where these people are. And they have been there from the time Nigeria came to be. Nigeria came to be about 1914. Lord Lugard was the governor of, administrator of Northern and Southern protectorates. He has a long history. Well, let's just say it, Northern and the Southern. The Southern included the Eastern and the Western, and then the North. The division of the delimitation of these three pillars of Nigeria at the time was problematic, because it gave an unequal um, right or position or portions to the northern group. And that created a lot of problems in the early days, especially in the 40s and 50s, when Nigerian political generation began to happen, causing a problem in the Lagos politics of the early 50s as a result of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe's win, when everybody was supposed to be everybody, living anywhere you were, having your politics or your business or your life or your culture practiced anywhere. So Azikiwe was very popular in Lagos at that time and had an election in the Western Zone to be the prime minister, I mean the premier of Western Nigeria. He had won the election, was actually, I mean, ready to form a government the next day, and what we know today as cross carpeting happened. And when it happened, most Yoruba people cross carpeted from the action group, I mean from the NCNC, Nigerian Convention of National Convention of Nigeria and Cameroon, which was headed by Herbert Macaulay, and Azikiwe was the secretary at the time, and later became the head of that party. Action Group was the opposition party, or rather the opposing party at the time, headed by Chief Awolowo. And when Chief Awolowo found out that he couldn't win the election, he engineered the cross-carpeting phenomenon in Nigerian politics. That was part of the beginning of the crisis or the quarrels between the Yorubas and the Igbos, because for some reason, the Yorubas took it Another level, the Igbos did not, it wasn't only the Igbos who supported Azikiwe. Many Yoruba people were part of the supporters because at that time there was a fairly decent national mentality at that time. And so Zik was ahead. But after the cross carpeting, Zeke was swept off, and Awolowo stepped up and took over to be the prime minister, the premier.
So what you are saying is that the the creators of Nigeria, they wanted a Nigeria where an Igbo man can be governor in the Yoruba land, a Nigeria where a Yoruba man can be governor in Sokoto. Because at that time also, if you remember, Malam Umaru at time was the mayor of Enugu from 1952 to 1958. A Fulani man was the mayor of Enugu. So they wanted a Nigeria where anybody can be anybody, irrespective of where you come from. But
Yes, I was coming to
that
that.
was stopped
Exactly.
by what you are saying that
Yeah,
happened in the Yoruba land. Go ahead.
yeah. That's part of what I was going to say. As a matter of the democratic, the way the democratic government was being formed at the time, Altine, a Fulani from the northern part of Nigeria, was elected mayor of Enugu. And let's say Enugu was the headquarters of Eastern region and predominantly, in fact, 100% Igbos. Excuse me. But it was found out that the problem between the Yorubas and the Igbos are two people looking for something that they both cherish. There was no problem with that. But the fact that tribalism, nepotism, and all that was instilled into the Nigerian body politic was traced back to that happening in Lagos, I mean, in the Western region, denying Azikiwe the opportunity to become the premier of Western region. If Altine had run to be the premier of Eastern region and won, he would have been. He only
Yes.
ran for the mayor and he
Yeah.
won and was instituted and he
Yeah.
served for many years. And actually,
Yeah.
I heard all the stories. I was born in Enugu, and I can tell you that I had a lot of Western schoolmates, a lot of Northern schoolmates, the Musas and the Karimus and the Abdullahi and all that. We were all Nigerians, and it was fun. But when this problem came up, I remember very clearly there was a time the Eastern Command of the mobile police went to the West to support the government in suppressing Western crisis, what they called Operation Wet Here, meaning to wet him and burn him, which was the plan, or rather the approach of the action group or so in the Western region. In short, the Western region was a fire, was ablaze, and the Eastern police, the mobile police from the East went there to help. Uh, you know, recently, in fact, maybe last week, properties of Igbo people were being burned down in Lagos, which is, of course, in Lagos State. Now we have had a lot of state creations that has crystallized into Lagos colony in the days, being made a state, which it deserves, of course. And the Igbos were quite instrumental in making the Lagos what it is today. No doubt about it. Some people want to argue about it. So, as a result of Igbo being entrepreneurial and very aggressive in business, they were able to their own detriment, develop Lagos to the point where today they are saying Igbos must go. Go where? Where are they supposed to go? Are they not Nigerians? Is Lagos not Nigeria? Must they go to their village in Abogugu or in maybe Okuzu, so that they will be safe. But they are Nigerians. There are Yorubas in Abakaliki. There are Yorubas in Abogugu. There are Yorubas all over Eastern Nigeria, the abode of the Igbo people. And they are doing their business. Nobody is bothering them. But to say that the Igbos must go and burn down their businesses and their lives and themselves, killing them, is quite disturbing, to say the least. And so that's part of what we want to explore here. How do we forestall this from happening? The current president is a Yoruba man, at least to the best of our understanding. And the Igbo people says they are not going anywhere. They are Nigerians. The way they were being treated pre-war, and which is in the 60s. And then some people argue that Nigerian crisis did not start from the Biafran War. And it actually started from this type of behavior that was cropping up in the minds of Westerners, especially Yorubas at the time. And that was, like I said before, the political problems that brought about the ungovernability of Nigeria in 1965 after the election of Western elections. And the Kaduna boys that are called, the Nzogos, the Ademwenros, and the rest of them gathered together. And
before you get there, I
mm,
want us to finish the one about the Nigerian map that included the Igbos, in Benue State, in Kogi, which they now call North Central, that they call, when they want to say, they say the North. When they say the North, it included the Igbos that are in Kogi and Benue State. That is part of that injustice that we want to discuss. Then after that, you address the Nigerian census of 1953, how the British came up with the notion that the rainforest of the southern Nigeria has lesser population than the arid north, where they say the north has more population than the south, because that is what they've been using up to today in creating all the constituents. Members representing the northern people in the north have higher membership than people from the south. So these are the kind of injustice and marginalization that are in place against the Igbo. So also the current map where they came and divided our people and called them South-South. Meanwhile, majority of Igbo people are also living in that South-South, Bayelsa, Cross River, and River State, and others. And so these are the starting point of the injustice. So now let's go to the Nigerian census. If you know anything about Nigerian census of 1953, you let us know. Then after that, we go to the election of Tafawa Balewa of MPC as the prime minister in October to usher in the new administration. How MPC formed the government with Azikiwe, because Azikiwe wanted to form government with the Yoruba people, but the British didn't want that. They want Azikiwe to form government with Tafawa Balewa, So those are the chronology that I would like us to follow, because we're still going to go to the 1966 Q that was called the Igbo Q. Why was it called the Igbo Q? Followed by the program. We have a lot to cover, so let us follow it in that order. So now tell me something about the Nigerian census of 1953 and how they use it to marginalize the Igbo people, the Igbo race.
Well, I think there was a census in 1951, which was rejected by everybody. And then the 1953 came up, and it was also not accepted generally, but it was managed so that they could, because at that time, the East and the West were ready to get their independence. independence, but independence wasn't going to come except they had the census, so that they, according to them, they will have a fairly good number of the people, you know. Um, well, like I said before, that number, that census was also challenged, and but they used it to give. I think the East had about 12 million, the West had about the same number, and the North had, just the North alone had double that number, so that no matter what the East and the West did, their number, their election results will fall under what the North wanted, because the colonial masters had planned to give power anyway to the Northern group.
Exactly. Exactly.
And they had to set that census up to be the judge, or to be the reason or rationale for that political jingoism. So,
So the
having done
injustice we
that,
are, the injustice we have in Nigeria today stem mainly from from that census. But that is the same census
well,
that they are
if you
using
say
today.
that, okay, if you say that, I would like to point us back to the fact that the 1914 amalgamation of Nigeria was wrong. Everybody, most people who know the history and the impact of that amalgamation and the circumstances of the amalgamation, for just for the convenience of the British colonial masters, because they had been doing business with the South, and they started trying to do business with the North. It wasn't possible. So when they succeeded in getting the North, they said, okay, they want to bring it together so they don't have to put another administrator in the North. That's why they set the headquarters at Lokoja at that time. They moved the headquarters different places, Asaba, Lokoja, even Calabar and Lagos. So they put the headquarters in Lokoja at the time for their own convenience. That's the point I'm making. That
Okay.
the reason Nigeria came to be is for the convenience of the British colonial masters, who were
Now,
just,
let me ask you. Sorry.
go ahead.
What do you think is the reason that the British colonial masters prevented Zik and Awolowo from working together, from forming a government, and instead pressured Zik because Zik has some financial dealings with the bank, which they know. They told Zik that if he didn't form that government with Tafawa Balewa in 1960, that he will go to jail. So Zik was pressured to, instead of forming government with Awolowo, then he went and formed government with the NPC Tafawa Balewa government.
Well, they said it will be better to do North and South instead of South and South, like we talked today about a Muslim or Christian ticket. So that's kind of sailed, because that was a way to, quote unquote, make sure that the North was pulled into, the North was not interested in Nigeria. Had been issue, really. They never really wanted to do anything, to have anything to do with the amalgamation. And that's why, like I was saying earlier, they were to do election in 1954. And that's why they had election census in 51, which they rejected. In 53, it was accepted reluctantly, and the election couldn't hold in 54. So they tried to do it in 56. The North was still not ready. But at that time, in 1956, 57, it was decided that the election will be done 2 years from then, which was 59. And again, whenever they had those meetings and what have you, or conferences, what have you, they were always looking at what would benefit the colonial masters. Were always looking at what would benefit them, and the benefit they get was, they obviously they were taking a lot of the uh, products, natural resources, and others without accounting for it, or paying adequately for it. So it was easier for them to do it with the North, but the South was quite against it. And so they wanted to break the South so that they can, divide and conquer will come to play. So by the
Okay.
time the election came in 1959, there was a lot of juxtaposing. There was a lot of political movement, jingoism, and campaigns, and what have you. It was recorded that Azikiwe eventually settled with forming a government of NCNC NPC. NPC being Northern People's Congress, NCNC being National Convention of Nigeria and the Cameroons. At that time, Southern Cameroon was still part of Eastern Nigeria. Excuse me. So it was agreed and had the election, and that coalition won the election. But the head of the NPC, Sadauna of Sokoto, Ahmadu Bello, refused to go to Lagos to be the head of government. He sent the secretary of his party to be the head of government, to form the government according to the rules or the constitution at the time. That's what sent Tafawa Balewa, Alhaji Tafawa Balewa to Lagos, being the headquarters of the capital of Nigeria, then political capital. Um, that put that positioning put Awolowo outside of government, and he formed the opposition party. He became the opposition party. Action Group was Awolowo's party, and based on that opposition party position, it was being looked at as it was suspected that he wanted to overthrow the government at the time, and eventually had a lot of problem in the 60s, early 60s, 61, 2, 3, about that time, and they put him in jail. When they put Awolowo in jail, a lot of people suspected it was the doings of Nnamdi Azikiwe, and as usual, Igbo people. And some other people thought it was Sadauna. The truth of it is that, in fairness, Awolowo was more against colonization, continued colonization after independence. He was more vocal, he was more aggressive, he was actually threatening change of government, forceful change of government. And at the end of the day, he was put in jail. And like I said earlier, because of that imprisonment of Awolowo, some other people said they were going to put him in Kaduna, and if they put him there, they were going to kill him. That is why they sent him to Calabar against the plan of the head of government, who was Tafawa Balewa at the time. So between the time he was in jail, they put him in jail in the early 60s up till about 1967, he was in Calabar. Awolowo, Chief Awolowo, the former premier of Western Nigeria, was in prison in the East, Calabar. And it never was resolved how he got, whether the Igbos were involved or Ziki was involved or deals were made. But these are politics that happens everywhere. How the Yorubas began to use it as a point of anger to kick against everything in Igbo was terrible. But unfortunately for Igbo, instead of allowing the Western crisis to simmer at the national, allow the national, they went to assist the Eastern government of Almighty Obara, M.I. Obara, went to assist in that it was a southern region. Western region was in the south. And they formed what they call the UPGA. It's UPGA, yes. United Progressive Grand Alliance. That was a party formed between the Igbos and the Yorubas in order to nullify or neutralize the dominance of the North in the political spectrum. How much he worked or helped with the Igbos, I don't know, but I'm quite sure it succeeded in assisting the Western region. But the crisis didn't end because, like I said before, about 1965, after the Western election, there was more fire on the mountain than was expected. There was no government. Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa could not form a government, and something has to happen. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, being the president, a total ahead, had no power. He had some power to, do a few things, but he couldn't do anything at that particular time. And it resulted in the Kaduna boys taking over the government by force.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Ken. Before we continue, let me do a system break. Just a minute. Thank you very much. We are using this opportunity to also invite other well-meaning Igbos, Biafran, and Africans that wants to appear on this interactive section to let us know in the comment section so you can be contacted so that you can appear and help us to analyze and provide the correct information to our people from the Igbo man, from Biafran and African perspectives. Also, if you want to advertise your business in this university, and in Kolo Mahadum Wisdom University, let us know by writing your comments in the comment section so that we can get to you. If you want to appear on the program at any time, if you want to advertise any of your business or anything in this platform, let us know in the comment section. Now, continuing with Mr. Ken. Mr. Ken, is the 1966 coup that was called an Igbo coup, is that an Igbo coup or a coup meant to solve the problem of Nigeria and make Awolowo the president?
Well, record shows, and as I was pointing out earlier, that this coup, 1966 coup, the very first coup in January of 1966, was conducted by Kaduna boys. And these Kaduna boys did not know tribe. They just know the nation. They know Nigeria. Some of them are from the west, some are from the east, some are even from the north. So, but they were assigned different places to go and operate, remove the government and the head of government, their premier, whether it's Premier Opera in the east or Sadana in the north, or the one in the Midwest and the Western Premier. Well, there was problem in the West. I wasn't sure who was the Premier at the time. They were having a duality of government at the time. So those are part of the problems that they wanted to straighten out. It turned out to be bloody. And Opara was hosting in the East. The former Premier, the president of Cyprus or something like that, and wasn't in his house. Fortunately for him, he was at the airport leading off the prime minister of Cyprus or the head of government of Cyprus also. And that saved him. By the time they could, the coup plotters could get to him, I understand he was wasted off somewhere with the governor of the state, of the region that time, Dr. Akanu Ibiam. Now, that hasn't been, that being the case, it was not an Igbo coup, and not only not Igbo coup, there was no plan not to execute Opara, just that he was fortunate on that day, as they said. And the coup happened, and the government was changed, albeit violently, because some of the people, like Ahmadu Bello, did not sign the government, the handover paper, and he was executed by the people assigned to do change of government over there. So it's not an Igbo coup.
So why did it not lead to the program, the May program of 1966 that led to the killing of so many Igbo military
That is what.
officers and
That is what.
civilians? Why did it lead to that?
Well, one, I'm not God, so I can't say in the context of why. But analytically, Ahmadu Bello, the Northerners, particularly the Muslims, have a different way of looking at their leaders. They trusted their leaders, and you don't mess with them. So to kill Ahmadu Bello was, in my language, they would say, "Ibupumong," that is to unmask their God, because he was treated as God at the time. And the Northerners, the Muslims, have more respect for their leaders than most other religion that I know. So that really angered the Muslim North, the Northerners in general, because at that time, North is one North. It's not like now they are divided in East, West, North, and all that central. But because of that misinformation, the Muslims in particular and the Northerners of far north began to kill and maim and destroy the Easterners in general, but the Igbos in particular. And they continued for a long time, that it was adjudged by some to be a pogrom. Over 30,000 people were killed between the time the pogrom started about the middle of March or thereabout, all the way. And unfortunately, the person who took over power, Major General Lagui Ronsi, who took Nigeria to Congo, had all kinds of accomplishments for the United Nations of the day, was trusted to the forefront of leadership. He became the head of state of Nigeria and happens to be an Igbo man. So the argument was that the Igbos took the power and gave to their brother. And then
Okay.
that angered the Northerners, particularly the far northern Muslims. And they continued to the point that they planned a counter coup. And but they didn't want to do the coup in the north, being that in the north, if they did, they said one of the things I read over the time, that if they had the coup in the north, people will come over there, and Igbos or Easterners will come up there and start the war. They actually wanted to secede from Nigeria as a result of that, saying that the Nigerians don't want them.
The
But
one
they
they
were
call Araba.
Araba, yes, that was the language. But they
Yes.
stayed, they were made to stay. Then
Okay.
they countered the coup with Danjuma and Co. Danjuma was a captain major at the time, and he led the coup that killed Aguiyi, and there are many accounts of that. Aguiyi and Fajuyi is a host in the West. Colonel Fajuyi was the military governor of Western Group of Provinces, as they called it at the time. So on the death and on the removal and death of Aguiyi, uh, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon appeared on the stage in August of 1967, 66, I'm sorry, and took over power. Then Igbos were still being killed everywhere, particularly in the north. Where they are not killed, they are harassed, they are, made very uncomfortable, and a lot of Igbos began to deny their Igbo origin. And you don't blame them, because you want to save your life first. Especially people of Midwestern region, the Igbos of the Midwest, the Igbos of Delta, what do you call it now? Delta region, which is comprising of river states and all that riverine areas, easily declined that they were not Igbo. But when the northerners, when the northerners were killing people, they were killing anybody eastern, whether you are from Calabar, you are Ibibio, you are Efik, you are Uboni, you are Ijaw, you are whatever, as long as from the east. First, some Benue were killed because they were about to just anybody south of Benue River. You have to prove yourself, otherwise they were to kill you. So with that conflict, with that crisis at the time, Nigeria coasted and coasted until other political issues, even the head of the governor of Eastern Group of Provinces, Odumegwu Ojukwu, Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, encouraged ndị Igbo to go back to the north, that peace has come. And
Now that
regretted it.
now that you mentioned Odumegwu Ojukwu, let me ask you, why is it that the January 4th and 5th, 1967 Aburi conference held in Ghana, why didn't Gowon abide by that agreement? Why did he renege? Why did he not carry out the agreement Gowon reached with Ojukwu in Ghana in the Aburi conference?
Yeah, well, Aburi is still being debated, I must say, because the reason is that the secretary to the government at the time, I believe it was the I don't know if he's still alive, but something Oba of Benin, yeah. When the meeting held after the Aburi, I understand that he told Gowon that if you implement this, you don't have a position any longer. You are no more the head of state. Because what the Aburi is said to have provided is confederation. Confederation. So it's no more a federation, it's a kind of an arrangement where a rotating president presidential system will come to be. So each group of provinces will send somebody to be the head of a government for some time, and then it rotates. Gowon, according to them or himself, said he fell sick. I don't know whether it's because of the meeting or the consequences. And so he didn't say anything about the meeting until 2-3 days later. By then, Ojukwu had already given a world conference stating that this is what the Aburi Accord is all about and that they're expecting implementation. The lack of implementation of Aburi Accord early 1967 resulted in the Eastern Nigerian government clamping down on the revenues that was supposed to turn in March. I think March was the end of fiscal year. And from then, Nigeria began to plan ways to remove Ojukwu. Odumegwu Ojukwu continued to lead. The people liked him and what he was doing, had no problem with him. And somewhere in the month of May, he had a consultative, and then he consulted with members of the House of Assembly and other establishments. And it resulted that Aguirre's body was not brought back. I don't know, I can't remember where it had been brought back then. No result or compensation was given for those people who were killed in the north. Their remunerations were not paid. There was a lot of anger in the east, and he was asked to secede from the nation because from the country was no more seen to their welfare. The injustice we are talking about was piled up and recorded, and as a result, and they also at that time, Gowon was about to split the country or the states into, I mean, the groups of provinces into states. We had four regions. Started out with three. We had four regions. And when the coup happened, and General Maguironsi called them group of provinces, and then Gowon, when he came up, he divided it up into 12 states, and of course, gave one state to his own state, which was Plateau. There was a time the issue was uh, Middle Belt states during the time of this guy. I forgot his name now, but I remember. So when what's his name? When Awolowo was put in prison in the Cross River, at that time in the eastern region, but in Calabar City, he started, convincing people, according to the story, to go for core states, what they call Calabar Ogoja River states, Calabar Ogoja River states in the eastern region, in order to divide up. So that advice almost was what Gowon used, and also got a Plateau state for his people, gave a River state to people, because at that time there was agitation for separation in the riverine areas.
So
Um,
all this culminated to the Nigerian Biafran Civil War from 1967 to
yeah,
1970.
yeah. It was after Gowon tried to create the states on the 22nd, 27th or so of May, and the people authorized Ojukwu to go ahead and declare Biafra. On the 30th of May, Ojukwu declared the separation of Eastern region from the Federation, and that became the Republic of Biafra.
Okay. And then after this, that genocidal war, where we learned that some people say some accounts for 3 million people, some say it's 4, some 5, some 7 million people were killed, and properties worth billions, trillions of dollars destroyed, and um, um, the sea was blockaded. There was hunger in Biafra land. And after all that war, and Nigeria defeated Biafra. And they said, no victor, no vanquished. But there was a victor and there was a vanquished, because our people were given 20 pounds right after that civil war. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I will like to start with no victor, no vanquished.
Mm,
That is what was said.
mm.
I'll also like to stand with a lot of loss, human, material, and otherwise. The psychological trauma and all that, that was just too much on the Igbo people. They were not quite, even though they said the three R's: rehabilitation, reconciliation, and reconstruction. Well, one can argue that, they started, but I don't know how far it went at that time, right after the war in 1970. Some of us were still much, much, much younger then, but we saw the Taylor Woodrows who were doing construction. We had the few things here and there, but the reconciliation, I don't know how much it went, because in the north, ironically, most of the abandoned, quote unquote, abandoned properties, or properties left by the Southerners, especially the Igbos, were given back to them. But in some areas in Lagos, in Ojukwu fought for his father's property up till God knows how long. It's still very current in comparison. But in the Rivers State, in Port Harcourt, we had people who were killed because they went to take their property, believing that it's a done deal. Yes, evidence to show it's my property. They were killed. So on top of that, when they wanted to change money, the currency in about 1972 or 3, I think it's 2 or 3. from pound, Nigerian pound to Nigerian naira. They were advised to, or rather ordered to put all their money in the bank, and that nobody knew exactly what was going to be given back to them. Maybe they thought they were going to get exactly the same amount, or maybe a little bit will be taken off. But they just, at the time, Chief Awolowo was the premier. I mean, was the what do you call it? The
Finance
commissioner,
minister.
federal, yeah, finance minister.
Finance
What he was
minister.
called. Okay, so he made the rule that no matter how much you put in there, billions, millions, whatever you put there, I'm sure nobody put 20 naira, but everybody was given 20 naira.
Wow.
He killed the economic power of the Igbo man, added to the war trauma. So the Igbo man was supposed to be, the injustice was just too much. Was supposed to, finish off the Igbo man. But as God may have it, even though added to that difficulty, what they called the indigenization, it was 1972. Indigenization decree was instituted to sell off, government properties and all that to the people. And the people are those who have money. People at that time had no money. This was a design to totally wash Igbo people hand out of the economy.
Mm.
But people say today that the economy of even the president of Nigeria, what's his name, the late Buhari, said that the economy of Nigeria, the Igbos control the economy of Nigeria. As opposed to what they were supposed to do, that Igbos are not supposed to be a part of the economy and become slaves in their this, and which some of them,
And now and now they introduce this quota system, removing meritocracy. They introduce the quota system whereby every state have to bring so number of people, no longer meritocracy. And in the admission to some universities, you have to score higher mark in the eastern region and some western region. You have to score like 130, 140, but somebody from the north can score only 40 or 30. The person will still be admitted. So this quota system also was meant to impoverish the Igbo children from being successful as they should. How do you see that quota system as a part of the injustice that the Igbos are suffering in Nigeria?
again, we are just talking, laying out the history as it is. But there could be other type of analysis that could say, to God be the glory, because it costs. I was saying the other day that I don't work smart. I don't work hard. I work smart. What do I do? Somebody said, what do you mean? I said, I mean that I work harder so that by the time you measure by hard, I already skipped hard. I was already in hard. So he said, oh, is that what you mean? I say, yeah, because they're going to measure you by hard work. But if you are working harder, then you're already way ahead. So that was it. Because of the so-called quota system, which is another injustice against those who are doing better. And in most cases, it's evident that Igbo people are doing much, much better than most other people. Maybe their counterparts are probably some Yorubas, Some people don't like to hear that, the truth of it, but it's there every day. Every day. And this child did this thing, it's a Meko Kumpo, it's an Igbo boy, it's an Igbo girl, and so on. I'm not saying other people are not doing well, but if some people did 12, Igbos will do 2,000. So you see that then they started giving quota, even in the army, even in the employment in the workforce. So because if they give a level, say you're going to have to score 50. Okay, the Igbos will score 50 and above, and you see a lot of people in the north who will score 25. So if you do by merit, you will give it all to the Igbos. And so they came with the quota system, giving quota here, quota there. and those who will not even measure up. Some people who were, I remember clearly when we went to some training in Lagos, we were school starters, full scale school starters. Some people were still taking their G4. Some people had not no G4, they had only G3. And we were already, school starter, already had our West African school certificate, and so on. So the water system, and then in the army, in the all the militaries, and so on and so forth. There were so many disparities, and that was injustice.
Okay, so how do you also see this issue of no federal infrastructures? We don't have any international airports. We cannot fly from Enugu to London or Paris or to Saudi Arabia and come back to Enugu. We cannot fly away from Owerri Airport or fly away from Abakaliki Airport. And there's no seaport. I haven't also seen like a federal hospital in our area. So why is it that there's no federal infrastructures in our land?
Well, we have outlined a lot of injustices, and it goes with the territory. It goes with the plan of the powers that be to deny the Igbos of certain opportunities to advance. But again, like I said, I must mention that that has also caused the Igbos to work for themselves, to move. They have community organizations. In fact, if you go to the east, if you have traveled around Nigeria, you see that government build schools in the north, but those schools are left for cows and cattle. Igbos government don't build schools in the south, in the east, in Igbo land. Igbos levy themselves to build schools and all that. And you see them performing wonders academically and otherwise. Okay. So like what we say, one who is holding somebody down is holding himself. It is wrong. And even though I have been in places where they argued that those contracts were given out, but they weren't built, that the monies were returned, that they gave it in order for you to, the Igbos contractors or whatever, to return the money back to them. The governor, the ministers of works, ministers of housing, minister for all that, I don't know, but I have to present it because we have to present both sides, the truth as we know it. And so the injustices are there, but also the Igbo people's inability to account for some of the contracts. Say, for example, Inugo-A Road, they said has been given so many times, and until just a few years ago, it was began to be, they began to build it. So we must also look at how Igbos have done themselves in somewhere.
Okay. How do you see the roadblocks? The roadblocks, for example, from Lagos to the eastern region, and then when you come into the eastern region, you see a lot of roadblocks, either by the army or police or DSS or road people. What do they call it? The road people, the NY, what their name? The people that searching for vehicles. So different roadblocks, both customs, everywhere, even within 1 mile, everywhere in our land. How do you see that such roadblocks? Sometimes our people are even meant to come down on the roadblocks and raise their hand and walk through the roadblock and then go and rejoin their vehicle. How do you see all those roadblocks in our land as part of the injustice we are talking about?
Yeah,
and when do you think the roadblocks will be removed so that our people can be free?
Oh man, you are giving me so much headache here. Am I the government or do I even know what they are doing? But anyway, I understand your question. It's like you know, but we just spoke about, uh, okay, we're talking about, we just spoke about contracts that were given out, and some people didn't do it. Instead, they went and shared, went and shared the money with the minister or members of the ministry that those contracts were given, whether it's building of hospitals or roads and what have you. Now, I was trying to say that the government, or rather, yes, the recently a journalist of high repute, supposedly in Nigeria, had said that the war never ended. They were still fighting. I was shocked to my
mm,
bones that somebody of his caliber would say something like that.
mm,
And someone I had in high regards, you know, I used to. But now I know that being a Yoruba man, that maybe this is another way of, socio-psychological way of reminding people that, like you said, the Igbos were defeated or did not win the war, and that there are some areas that they feel like they still want to punish the Igbos in order to put them in their place, if I may say that.
mm,
Now, having said that, not giving the Igbos or the Igbo land adequate infrastructure, they
mm,
think is a way of holding them down. It's injustice, because if you look at how much, if you take out the time to go and look at how much is being allocated to other states, compare it with how much is being allocated to the so-called southeastern states of Igbo, you will cry. Okay.
mm, mm,
So when you look at this location, look at the practice, and then look at the consequences. Well, some of those things made it possible, or uh, is the reason why many of us left Nigeria to come for greener pastures here. If you pass, your grade is 300, you met 350, Northerner makes 200, he gets to enter the university or get a job. You don't.
mm.
So when you look at all those injustices, you start looking for a place where a fairness, we cannot deny that here where we are in the United States, no place is heaven. But definitely we have opportunities to, get a level playing ground, so to say, and be able to grow yourself both academically and otherwise. But in Nigeria, I find it very difficult, because I lived in Nigeria after having been to the United States. I lived for some years, and I was able to understand the workings of the government of Nigeria, and it is not pretty.
So let me ask you, because you already touched on this item before when you were talking, the issue of no equal opportunities in Nigeria, like in the current government of Nigeria. The Igbo man is number six. The Igbo man is not number first. We all know that Peter Obi actually won the last election and was manipulated and given by Tunumbu, by the colonial masters. And in the current setting, we are not number one, we are not number two, we are number six, the deputy speaker. That shows that we don't have equal opportunity. How do you see that?
Well, because we are talking not news per se, but we are, having um, news affairs, commentary, and all that right here. I'll tell you that it's obvious by all accounts that Peter Obi won the election of 2023. But somehow, the way Nigeria goes, he was declared a non-winner, and Tinubu was declared to be the winner. There were protests. In fact, I just read this morning that there was an attempted coup or planning of a coup in Nigeria against Tinubu just maybe a week, in the last week. Okay, people believe that the government of Nigeria is being Nigerian government in the hierarchy, like you said. Obviously, the party that wins will be the one to adjust things accordingly. So that was even forecasted, one of a campaign slogan by, who is that? I think the guy with NNDC or NNPC, whatever, in the north. It was not easy for you to speak of fairness when there is no equity. Okay. If there was, if Obi had gone to office and then the economy is like this, it would be easier for someone to say, you see, you got a chance, but you didn't make it. But he, first of all, an Igbo man was denied a well-documented win on the office of head of state, head of power, government to form a government. Then the person that stepped up, we know the economy the way it is today. Everybody knows Nigeria's economy. It's not a hidden fact that Nigerian economy stinks. It's gone south. It's terrible. But maybe that is why, if the alleged coup attempt or planning of the coup is true, it's as a result of people not being happy with what is going on, which
That's
means that
correct.
it's not just the Igbo people alone, which I always tell people, say, allow this thing to play itself out. Okay? Mazen Nnamdi Kanu has cried himself hoarse that we are going here, that we are going to end up here. People are going to be killed. Igbos are going, and so on. He said so many things that has happened and are yet to happen. But instead of heeding his call, at least, setting up to look at it, they started pursuing this young man and
Now that
got him.
now that you are talking about Nnamdi Kanu and the continuation of the Nigerian government to pursue him, how do you see his illegal arrest and detention, illegally abducting him from Kenya? And remember also, they went to his house when he was preparing to go to court in Abuja to kill him, and he was able to run away. Going to his house to kill him and renditioning him from Kenya illegally, does it give Nigeria any local standing to continue trying him? Or is that part of that injustice against the Igbo race?
Evidently, you have said it is part of the injustice, because I'm not the one to speak, because that's a legal matter. But a legal luminarian and, in fact, a judge in Kenya had already ruled on that matter, that, Nigeria had no locus. Nigerian government had no locus. And also, Zakene, who is one of the legal personnel that has addressed this matter, even in court, and some judges have refused to handle the matter, saying that, that the same thing, that Nigeria has no locus. And they have come up with even new charges. The very first time that he was tried or whatever, released, and you won't blame him for defending himself or running away from obvious death that was coming, because many people were killed in the process. And eventually, he did not come to court, as they were saying. Well, he couldn't have come to court. If you see that people are coming to kill you, you wouldn't be going to court. So after that, then on his own personal business to Kenya, he was interdicted, okay? In that illegal arrest, he was brought to Nigeria. No other offense. And so they haven't been able to make a case. They have been staying on technicalities. And that's why, in fairness, this political arrest and detention of Mazen Nnamdi Kanu should be ended and let the man go free. Maybe he will even help out inducing the people who are claiming Nnamdi Kanu, you put him in prison, release him. Let us see what he will do. So that's my thinking. That's my take on it. You know, if he's
Thank you
going to
very,
cause,
thank you.
I don't think he can cause more problem than is already on the floor. I sincerely do believe that his release will douse some of the fire that is burning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. We are listening to Keny Inugo, the public analyst specializing in media psychology and public policy. Again, we want to thank Ken for coming today to share his vast knowledge with us as a public analyst specializing in media psychology and public policy, helping us to sort out, helping us to understand more the injustices against the Igbo race in Nigeria. Let's continue. We have a few more points to address before we close this program. So, Mr. Ken, continuing, you touched on Igbo must go earlier in the beginning. How do you see this Igbo must go that is going on in Lagos, especially? It's been going on sometimes in the north, sometimes ago, but now it's more now in Lagos, in Lagos State, particularly this Igbo must go thing. How do you see it? Is it good that people that live in the same country will be asked to go to where, like you said before? If you still have more to say on that, go ahead.
Truly, indeed, the question is go where? Excuse me, my battery went down. Where are they going to go? Is it not Nigeria? And are we not free to stay anywhere in Nigeria? If there is a restriction for the Igbos, legal restriction for the Igbos to stay in Nigeria, I mean in Lagos, then let's see it. And we see what that law, who made that law and how it came to be. Because no other people are being told not to. Even in the north, the Igbos are not, except for religious fundamentalism of the Boko Haram that is actually killing people. The Igbos are free to stay most of the places in Nigeria. But why should they live in not, why should they be meant to leave Lagos? Where, in fact, I have cousins who were born in Lagos, bred in Lagos, live like Lagosians, and that's their choice. So you can't just drive them away. I think I can't even begin to imagine what it is. But initially, sometime earlier, probably the early days of the 70s, when they were having that kind of problem, it was, very contained. It was quite small Aburu people in their motor park area where they operate. They fight those kind of fights. Those fights are done most other places, even in Onitsha, for their little portion. But when it became almost a state policy, destroying people's properties, killing them too in the process, because when you destroy somebody's property, and then it has psychological and even physiological issues, and then get hospitalized and die because of your action of
Before
denying him.
before we get to that Igbo property, we're gonna get to that. I have also heard, and you must have also heard last time, even the Oba of Lagos one time threatened the Igbos that they must vote for certain candidates. They must vote for their party. If they don't vote for their party, they will drown the Igbos in the lagoon. They will put them in the lagoon to go and die. How do you see
Yeah.
that?
Well, I read it in one of the journals, and I hope I choose to believe it's not true. But if it's true, it's unfortunate. It's terrible because an Oba is a traditional ruler who is respected in all cultures. So, but if an Oba steps up to make such a statement, that's, I mean, reprehensible, really, because that's actually putting added fire to kerosene or petrol. It should be a father and bring these people back to land, back to their right senses. Because in the general, at the end of the day, we are all of the same nation. We are all Nigerians. And if we are all Nigerians, then we have a right to live and seek for happiness and joy and prosperity anywhere, so long as you do it legally. Those who do things illegally, you allow the law to have its way. But yes, there was a time when a governor moved some people from Lagos to Onitsha, and dumped them there because he said they were beggars. But there are other beggars. I mean, beggars has always been there. Many beggars from the north, even from the west.
Exactly.
As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, one thing we don't know about Igbos are begging.
Mhm.
You know, till today, I still see when anybody who is Igbo come to beg me, so I say, "Are you an Igbo? Why can't you do blah, blah, blah?" Then I start counseling or doing stuff. You know, so Igbos are not known for to be beggars. They are known for hard work. You know, and to say that they must go from Lagos is reprehensible, and it won't happen because it's going to bring another war. Because people will fight
Now,
for what? As I said before, there are people who have built their lives in Lagos, don't even know where they come from, whether it's Nnewi or Enugu or Aba, Mba or whatever. But they know Ajegule, they know Lekki, they know Apapa, they know Ikoyi. They know all parts of Lagos. That's where they come from. That's where they know. And now you say because they are Igbo, they have to leave. We need to think again on that.
that's correct. Now I will show you a video of Igbo traders in trade fair. They went to the trade fair and their shops were locked. I want to show you that video, after which I want to hear what you have to say. Just give me a minute to look for that video. Just 1 second. This is the video. So, Mr. Ken, what do you think that people went to the market to in their business area to start their business, and they came to see that they are locked up, not allowed to enter into their business premises? How do you see that?
Well, you know it's been happening, and myself, I'm still wondering what is being done by, first of all, the government that we elected to provide security, protection for the people. And sometimes you don't hear them say anything because it's Yoruba people. And I hate to see that because it's making us look down on the government. And when people begin to put together a system to protect themselves, some of them were arrested and said they were robbers because they had weapons to protect themselves. So it is really unfortunate, more than unfortunate, that such a thing is happening. You do be damned, don't do be damned. You arm yourself to protect yourself, you are called armed robbers. You leave yourself, the government will protect you, government will not protect you. So lockout, excuse me, lockout is part of that injustice. Because what's the reason for locking me out? When I had a contract with you to do business in your premises, maybe, and for you to rent out your premises for me to do my business, whatever it is, as long as it's legal. They don't have any reason to do that. And I understand that some people have, gone to court, but are you going to court? It's the same people. It's like to have a case with a child and you go to the father to be the judge, you know?
That's
So
correct.
my take on it is that the federal government, who is supposed to be the final arbiter or the arbiter, should step into this and make a very sound, resounding. But you have to know that this was promised them when during the election, that if you don't elect, you will be made to leave. But you can't do that. It cannot do that because it's going to lead to the type of war that will be child's play, that the Biafran war will even be a child's play. Because most of these boys that you're seeing, you look at the election, the people in Lagos now are more Igbos than you have of, other people put together. So Lagos is the financial or economic capital of Nigeria, and anything that anybody is doing to remove it from there and leave Lagos with its national character, uh, lifestyle. Lagos is supposed to be accommodating, to be everybody can come and feel at home.
Now, as we are winding down this program, let me show you another video of Igbo houses, Igbo properties being demolished in Lagos, and let me see what's your take on that. Ken, what's your take on all these houses being demolished, Igbo houses being demolished in Lagos? What's your take on that before we come closing down? What's your take? That's part of that injustice we are talking about.
Well, one thing I must always say is we must be very, very careful. I have information, and I have to present it because that would be unfair, that some of those houses were built on pipelines. Some were built on electric lines that were taken out, and their houses were built there. A lot of things happened on the other side. Having said that, just for the fact that being in journalism, you have to present all facts as you know it, it's still not in the place of those destroying people's properties to do so. There is supposed to be a legal process that will go all the way to make sure that no injustice is done in the process of addressing violations or breaches of the law, as they may see it. It's the judge to decide. And then if it's decided, then it'll be done more humanely than to destroy people's properties, lock them out, or burn up their properties. These have legal implications that if Nigeria were to be one Nigeria, like they said at the end of the war, then, but now we're seeing that there is more than one Nigeria. There is two Nigeria, maybe three. Like you said, we maybe even have six Nigeria. And the Igbos are now in the sixth rung of the ladder. That is terrible. But you will tell everybody, tell Igbo people what to do because they say Igbo Bike, Onyagara 1 year. You only say it. I don't see it happening. I don't know how much they work for each other, come together. When you put together, the foam is much more, which means if you act together, your pool is small. So people should look at these things and not just leave it for those in Lagos, those who live in Lagos. There are ways you can do. You may have friends, like I tell my Yoruba friends, I say, I can never stop saying that evil is evil. Because what we are seeing in Lagos right now, with the slogan Igbo must go, is terrible. If Igbo must go, let them go to Biafra. Because they have already expressed their interest in staying in a one united, free Nigeria. But short of it, let them go. And let them go for real. Let them go and be gone to Biafra that they have fought. They have not just expressed their interest in creating their own, taking their destiny in hand. They have fought for it. How many times are they going to bleed just to be free and get equitability, and justice in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Keny Inugo, public analyst specializing in media psychology and public policy, for joining us in today's program to explain with all your experience and knowledge the injustices against the Igbo race in Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining me today. I have a good day. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you very much. I'm always glad to make out this time. Time is short, but I squeeze out time because this is important. And let me say this before we close. Igbos themselves, one that is being helped will help himself. Go together, sync your differences, put yourself together, and be able to muster some effort, some power, some synergy that will resonate in Nigeria, outside Nigeria, and move like the Jews you claim to be do move in the world. You will get somewhere. But it's not this PhD, pull him down. When your brother goes up, you want to pull him down because it's him, it's not you. Everybody have their own different skills and different, what do you call it, that they can show. Again. So what I'm saying is that Igbos should unite, first of all, before they begin to ask for help from outside. God will help them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keny Inugo, a public analyst specializing in media psychology and public policy, for joining us today. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. Have a nice remaining part of your day. Enjoy your week as it comes up. Have a splendid week.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are done with Ken. He's gone. And so what he's saying is people should come together. This is our individualism. This is our self-interest should be put aside for our collective interest, for the interest of the Igbo race, but we favor the Igbo race. And before we end this lecture, this interactive section today, if you are interested in joining us in an interactive section, please indicate in the comment section. And also, if you want to advertise any of your business in any of our lectures or interactive sections, also indicate in the comment section. And with this, I will bring in this interactive section with Mr. Keny Inugo to an end. Thank you very much for joining us. Please join us, subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, and like, share, and comment so that we know how we are doing in this university. This university is meant for you. Kolomahad Wisdom University is an university meant for you, meant for the Igbo race, meant for the Biafran and African, where we see things from the Igbo man, Biafran and African perspective, how things concern us. We see things from how they concern us, not how it concern other cultures. And with this, I shall bring it to this lecture section. And thank you very much. And please like, comment, and share. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.